When it comes to titter pigs, the comic book superhero genre is a tricky needle to thread for me. Too much math, rules, and strats, and it just feels clunky and slow, lacking the narrative punch and freedom I want from comics. Too few, and you might lack a sense of the scale of some powers, or get the satisfaction of a high-damage hit. And while neither of those styles is bad, sometimes they're better suited for certain campaigns you want to run, sometimes I want something in between that feels inherently comic booky. Enter Sentinel Comics, the role-playing game. Sentinel Comics, the role-playing game, for me, has the perfect balance of narrative freedom mixed with just enough numbers and rolls to make my dice-loving goblin brain titter with delight. Anyway, let's learn how to play Sentinel Comics, the I'm just gonna say Sentinel Comics from now on. First, Sentinel Comics uses what's called the GYRO System. Gyro? Probably gyro. Simply put, in this system, when you take an action that has a chance to fail with interesting consequences, you will roll 3 dice, and by default, your middle or mid result is the effect die. The effect die determines how effective your action is. Okay, I see a lot of hands going into the air. Yes, you. Where do the 3 dice come from? Excellent question. There are 3 trait groups: powers, qualities, and status. Powers are your superpowers. Qualities are skills and talents you have that are above average. And your status is how dire the situation is, either for you personally or for the whole scene. I'll explain that later. Each of these sets of traits are rated with dice from a D6 up to a D12, larger being better. And when you take an action, you will take only 1 trait from each set, whichever ones you can justify being useful to that action. 1 power, 1 quality, and whatever your current status is. So if you're gonna punch through a brick wall, you might say, well, I have super strength, so I'll use that die. I have martial arts as a quality, so I'll use that die, and my status is green, I have to use that die. If you don't have a power or quality that would apply to the action you're trying to do, then you roll a D4 for that trait set, cause you're basic. Now, exactly what powers do and the difference between ranks and powers is left a little fluid. There isn't a set distance a player with super speed can travel beyond the idea that a rank of D6 puts them above what most humans could ever do, and a D12 means that they're godlike in their speed. This isn't a system that's going to get into the nitty-gritty of that kind of stuff, but the ranks do give you a pretty clear idea of where you rank as far as the possibilities of that power. If you have a super strength D12, you are Hulk levels of strong. The same goes for talents, though those ranks all fall a bit more within human capabilities. Wait, so what is the status thing? Your status is either green, yellow, red, or out. Oh, hey, look at that! And your status determines just how dire the situation is for you. Having higher dice in your red status means that you might thrive in tense situations, and higher in green and lower in red means that you aren't so great under pressure. So what determines your status? 2 things. First, how much health you have will determine where you are in your health status zone. But in action scenes, there's also a scene tracker that goes from green to red. Every round, the tracker moves further along, and certain events can speed it up as the scene becomes more and more dire. Your status is whichever is worse between both of these. So if you have full health, green status, but the scene is in yellow, your status is yellow, even though you're at full health. Likewise, if it's the first round of an action scene, but you're clinging to your last few HP, red status. Okay, so that's where all the dice come from, but what's this effect die thing? Does the size of the die matter, like in Cortex Prime? Effect die is the middle result. The type of die does not matter. If you rolled a D6, D8, and D12, and the results were 6, 3, and 1 respectively, it doesn't matter that the D12 is the biggest die, it's a 1, so it's the minimum result. The D6, the smallest die, is the max result, and the D8, a 3, is the mid result, and by default is your effect die. So that's the rule. You roll 3 dice, the size of the die doesn't matter, and you will only use the middle result. Will we ever break that rule? Frequently, but we'll talk about how later. So, what does an effect die do? Well, that depends on the type of action being taken. And actions are most often taken during action scenes. An action scene often means combat, but it can be any tense scene where you're trying to accomplish something or some things. Action scenes are broken up into rounds, and the further on it goes, the more tense the scene gets, and after you've completed the full number of rounds in your little action scene round counter, if the heroes haven't completed what they're trying to do, knocking out a bad guy, stopping a doomsday device, then something bad happens. The scene ends. You don't just do combat endlessly until the heroes win. Anyway, every character, both player and non, gets 1 action per round. There is no rolling for initiative like in other systems. The first person to go is either the person initiating the action scene, or the GM will decide. Then, after a player takes their action, they get to choose who goes next, be it an ally or enemy. The last person to go in a round can choose anyone except themselves. Also, just because I didn't know where else to throw this in, action scenes are often divided into large zones. So if there were a fight in a museum, you don't really measure things out by 5-foot squares to figure out movement. Instead, you might say that there's out front of the museum, inside the museum, and on the roof. Seriously, zones can be that big. You can fight anyone in your zone or maybe ranged attack outside your zone. If you need to move to a different zone, that would usually take up your action for the turn, unless you have super speed or something. So I guess change zones is unofficially the first action we're covering, but what are the other actions? Attack. If you're in a situation with combat, you can choose to attack, and your result is how much damage you do to your target. Wait, but how do you know if you hit your target? Sorry, you're gonna have to leave that line of thinking back in other RPGs. If you attack, you hit. Same if an enemy is attacking you. This might sound kind of harsh, but it keeps combat moving quickly, and there are ways to mitigate damage that we'll cover in just a bit. But trust me, it works. Really friggin' well, actually. Like, so well, I kinda wish other genres operated in this way. Overcome. Whenever you're trying to get past an obstacle or make something happen that would pose a challenge, you will roll an overcome action. There are 5 possible results. A 12 or higher means you succeed beyond expectations, likely with extra results. D&D players, think of this as a critical success. 11 to 8 and you succeed. 7 to 4 and you succeed but with a minor twist. 1 to 3, you fail, or you can still choose to succeed, but with a major twist. And 0 means you fail in a big way. We'll cover what these twists mean in a bit, but first we need to cover boost or hinder. During your turn, you can also attempt to boost or hinder someone. This uses the same roll values as the overcome action, but you create a bonus or penalty between 0 and 4 that gets applied to you, an ally, or an enemy their next roll. If you roll a 9 while trying to create a boost for your ally, they now get +3 on their next action. Now, how this plays out narratively is up to you. Maybe you're causing a distraction or giving your ally an opening to attack, or maybe you're throwing sand in a bad guy's eyes to hinder them. So long as it makes sense, go for it. Now, these modifiers are typically single use, then they're gone. That's the rule, and just like the rule for how rolls work, you'll be breaking that rule, but I'm still not going to tell you why until we cover defend. Hey, remember how if you're attacked, you just take the damage, no roll to hit? Want that damage to be less, maybe even gone? Well, why not roll a defend action? If you roll a defend action on your turn, the next attack against you will do that much less damage, or you can use it to defend someone else. Oh, I don't want to waste my 1 action defending. Fine, don't, because you can also defend once per round as a reaction. Yes, if an enemy attacks you and you think, that's a lot of damage, describe what you do to avoid that damage, roll with the appropriate power, quality, and status, and minus your effect from the damage you would take. However, you can only defend yourself as a reaction, and it comes at the cost of a minor twist. Still not going to talk about those yet, sorry, you'll have to wait. There are other reactions that are specific to certain abilities, which we're about to talk about, but they're almost always only one die, which the ability will specify. Of course, you only get one reaction per turn, so you'll have to choose between defending yourself or your ability. And finally, we're going to quickly cover recovery actions. Recovery actions allow you or an ally to regain hit points, but only if you have an appropriate ability that lets you do so. So we should finally talk about abilities. Abilities are ways to enhance or modify actions, give passive bonuses, alter the dice rules, or give you unique actions with effects outside of what the normal actions cover. Abilities tied to actions, like attack or overcome, may allow you to take the max die for an action if you're using a specific power or quality. It might allow you to use multiple dice, like both your max and mid die, and add them together, or apply each one separately to multiple foes. Some non-action passive abilities might give you a passive bonus or effect, like reducing damage you take by different amounts based on your current status. Some abilities are their own unique type of action and might let you summon a minion whose strength is based on the size of the effect die. They are often a lot more beneficial than just standard actions, so you'll probably find yourself utilizing them frequently. However, you won't always have access to all of them. See, abilities are locked behind your current status. Your weakest abilities are green, so you'll always have access to them, but your strongest are red. You can only use certain abilities when you are at that status or worse. So you could access yellow abilities when in red status or yellow status, but not if you're in green status. Now, why is that? Well, think of it this way. If Superman started a fight against some bank robbers by throwing a building at them right off the bat, that would kind of be overkill. The situation has to be dire enough for Supes to bust out the big guns. Now, I've seen some people say that this feels kind of like forced tension, and it is, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's thematic to the genre, because remember, this is Silver Age comics we're talking about here. The mechanics are in service to that, and I like it. Hey now, this is all well and good, but what's a smooth way to transition back into talking about those minor and major twists you mentioned forever ago? Great question, clunky narrative device. So we've mentioned how on less than great results on overcome actions and for defending as a reaction, you will take a twist. But they can also come about as drawbacks for certain abilities or as environmental effects. Twists are either minor or major. A minor twist can be taking damage equal to your mid die, taking a hinder to yourself using your max die, losing access to an ability, or any number of narrative options. Might even move the scene counter forward because you goofed something up and made the situation worse. Major twists just ramp all those up. Damage could be max plus min die. A hinder would be max plus min. The scene escalates 1d4 spaces. You might lose multiple abilities. When it comes to the GM deciding what the twist should be, just remember that it should make sense in context to what the player is doing, and it shouldn't counteract what they were trying to accomplish. If a hero takes a minor twist to use a defend reaction, and as a minor twist you make them lose their mid die in health, you're literally just undoing the defend reaction, and that's stupid. Don't be a jerk, be creative. Twists should make a scene more interesting or tense. Okay, so we know how to select dice for a roll and interpret the results. We know what all the different actions are, how abilities can modify all that stuff I just said, and we know what twists are. As far as players are concerned, that's most of what we need to know. Wait, how the heck do I make a character? Alright, you just, Okay, honestly, you don't really need me for this. The game lays out the process really clearly. Now, there's a method to randomly generate a hero where everything from your background, power source, archetype, personality, all of that is rolled in a way where you just get to choose between 2 or 3 options within a table. With the type of dice they have you roll being used to assign ranks to your traits. The second method is to ignore the results of the dice and just choose the options you want to make the hero you want, still using the dice types to assign ranks. And the third options are to make whatever you want that the GM approves of, or maybe the GM makes up a method like some kind of point buy system. But in the main ways, the first two that I mentioned, every step and option you choose will have pretty clear instructions on what to do next, and there's enough variation that it's hard for me to make a meaningful summary in this video that would be any more helpful or fast than the book's one-page instruction sheet. It's basically required that you constantly reference tables and pages of the book, so just don't overthink it or try to learn it all at once. Just take it slow, step by step. And now I get to say the controversial thing that a lot of Titterpig players bounce off of, but hear me out. There isn't really any leveling up. Okay, so listen, you'll gain collections of back issues, like comic books, they call sessions back issues, that you can use to get special bonuses once a session, and in between arcs you might be able to justify trading out one power with another, but you don't just constantly grow more powerful. This isn't a game about becoming a superhero, your character already is a superhero. It's like starting a D&D campaign at level 20. You might say, how can that be interesting if I don't gain stuff as a character? And I get that, but maybe it can be more about the stories. Look, we all love leveling up and gaining powers, but that isn't really what this game is about. But if you really don't like that, you could totally homebrew it in a way where you start off with fewer powers at lower ranks and gradually build them up if you really want. But I encourage you to give this a try as is. It's oddly satisfying to not have to build up to the character you want to play from the very beginning. So, yeah, players, we got you covered. That's just about all you need to know. Now it's time to talk to the GMs, and what do heroes need? Villains. As a GM, you can make 3 kinds of bad guys, and that's all you need. Minions are the easiest. To make a minion, choose a size of die between a D4 and a D12. That is your minion. If your minion takes an action, that's the die that you roll. A D6 minion will roll 1d6 on an attack action, or 1d6 on an overcome action, or whatever. That die is most of what the minion can do. Now, what about health? No health, only the die. If that D6 minion is attacked by a hero, the minion rolls that D6. If the result is less than the damage of the attack, the minion is taken out immediately. I don't care if they're a D12 minion, they're taken out. If that minion rolls equal to or higher than the damage, they are not taken out, but their die rating is reduced to the next lower size. So a D6 minion would become a D4 minion. And since there is no die lower than a D4 in this game, a D4 minion can only be taken out by failing their roll against damage. Next are lieutenants, which are just big, unique minions. They're still just rated by a die, though typically only D8 to D12 because they're more powerful. However, their damage rolls work a little different. Instead, if they get equal to or higher than a hero's damage roll, their die rating does not decrease. Their die rating decreases only when they fail a roll against damage, and they are only taken out once they've been reduced to a D4 and fail the damage roll. So, they're minions, but a lot harder to take out. Now, both minions and lieutenants can have abilities if you want to make them more interesting or tough. You could give them a bonus to damage they deal, or a bonus to their hinder actions. You could give them automatic hinders against certain types of damage, and boosts against other types of damage. Heck, they could be wild abilities like the ability to divide into 2 minions of a smaller die rating. And the same goes for Lieutenant, though typically just give them beefier, cooler abilities. Villains are, in many ways, the same as heroes. They have powers, qualities, statuses, and abilities. However, villains' abilities are not dependent on their status, so they don't have to wait for red to use their toughest abilities. And their status die doesn't have to be reliant on their health. Some villains might have a constant status die, or their status could be based on something like how many of their minions are still standing. It all depends on the type of villain. Otherwise, they have health and operate the same as heroes. Finally, we've covered action scenes where there's a turn order and the actions taken within, but there are also social scenes where talking happens. Now typically these are going to be informal, people just talking and role-playing. You don't need turns, and you're basically not going to roll very often, if at all. But if you feel like rolls and whatnot are required, you can do a formal social scene where you have a turn order, just like an action scene, though not necessarily with any kind of scene counter. Maybe some of your players are trying to sneakily get by some guards while others are talking them up and you want to keep track of stuff. Now, this would be a good time to have a formal social scene. But otherwise, just stick to informal and let people do what they want when they want. Finally, there are montage scenes, where the heroes have an extended period of downtime. Here, each hero will get to choose one of 3 actions, or 2 of 3 if you feel there's enough time. There is Recover Health, where they regain health to the max of their current status zone, and they can take a twist if they want to gain 2 status zones worth, and a major twist if they want to heal all 3. The second action is a player can also help another character recover health, which will just recover 1 status zone worth of health, no options for extra healing. And finally, a player can choose to prepare a boost by using the boost action, giving them a bonus to use in the next scene. And that's it. That's Sentinel Comics. There are certain special powers or abilities that might give you a second form you have to keep track of, or odd circumstances that might go beyond the purview of this video, but I can't. I've been struggling so much with burnout and trying to get this video done for the better part of 4 months, I just can't anymore. It needs to be done, so it's done. That is Sentinel Comics, the RPG. Play the friggin' game. I love it so much. I've been so busy lately, but we're getting back on it. I got so many videos coming up. Gonna do one more multiverse. Gonna cover Dungeon Alchemist. God, that took me so long to think of. If you want to learn more, leave a comment. Ask me what I'm doing. Bye.